Reeves. Obviously, the OBR leaked the budget in advance, which was a massive cock up. And as I said to David Buick, who I spoke to last week, one of the biggest issues this government has had from an economic perspective has been its communication of policy. It's been absolutely appalling, drip feeding it, trying to get some public reaction, and they got told off in Parliament about doing that. And what then happens? The whole budget leaks. It's almost just a lovely cherry on top of what has happened. I felt for Rachel Reeves, but let's talk about some of the things that she introduced. So the income tax and national insurance thresholds have been frozen. Just so people actually understand what that means for them, can you just give us an overview to how that is going to impact somebody in their salary today, next year, the year after? Because it's been frozen until 2031.
Yeah. So that's frozen, which one could sit there and go, yay, it's not going up. But when you start hearing that minimum wage, is going to start to increase, and there will be salary increases going forward. So the more you ultimately get paid, the more you're going to end up actually being paid in tax, albeit at the 20 or the 11 or the 40 or the 45. More of your money as you receive money is going to be, unless you're over 65 and just on the state pension, you're going to have more of your money that's going to breach those personal allowances. That the personal allowance of 12,750 is going to stay where it is. So if you're earning 13,000 this year, you're going to be paying tax. Next year, you're earning 15,000 more tax, 18,000 more tax, because your thresholds aren't moving up with you. And then all of a sudden you breach 50,000 and you're into high rate tax. That's not going to move up with you. And then, God willing, in one way, we will make it to additional rate tax. We've seen that threshold come down from 150 to 122. So you're going to start, basically, it's a tax hike without officially putting a tax hike is the way I would, see this. Their manifesto said they weren't going to raise taxes. For me, it's the classic case of over-promising and therefore under-delivery. And if they would have probably sat there and gone, you know what, with all the furloughing, with all the bounce back loans, with everything that went on, we might have to put up tax. And no one would have been surprised to hear that. But the fact they've stood there and gone, we're not raising it, they've had to find other ways in how to raise taxes without raising taxes. That's
because this is called fiscal drag, isn't it? This is
or stealth tax, whatever. It will get absolutely right. That the idea that more and more people, as people will start earning more money. The grad who starts at 25k, the young person in Peterborough who's going to earn 18k a year. Suddenly, when salary increases are announced, if they're able to increase, then all of that is going to be taxed. Your personal allowance is not going to move up with you. You're just going to get closer and closer to the next threshold. And actually, when you go and reach in your pocket, potentially you could find yourself with slightly less.
And the idea of this being is that the person who's on 18 grand today, 5 years ago would have been on 14 grand.
Yeah.
And in 5 years' time, you'd expect the same job to pay something like 22, 23 grand because of inflation. And this is why this is this, as you call it, a stealth tax, because while the thresholds aren't moving and people go, great, it's not going up, inflationary pressures, wages are increasing. They are increasing slightly faster than inflation, which means that people are earning more money, and therefore, with the thresholds remaining the same, more of the money is being taxed. So I think I saw something on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen it, which is now somebody's going to be paid something like 22 grand for pushing trolleys around in supermarkets. That is now going to be probably a job that was minimum wage 10 years ago, wouldn't have been subject to any tax because they probably would have come below that threshold.
Correct.
Are now going to be paying basic rate tax on that 10 odd grand that they're over.
Yeah, it's going to be the classic case of I've got a salary increase, but yet why is it my pockets aren't bulging any more
Mm.
than they should be? And if we've got wage inflation at 2%, and cost of living, the consumer prices index, the shopping basket of life, is going up by 3% and a bit. So although your salary is going up, everything potentially might be going up faster. And so you're paying out more money for what you were, but your money isn't, your salary is not keeping pace. So your salary is going up, but so's everything else around you. And that's why when you reach into your pocket and you think, why is it I've still got the same amount of money that I had 2 years ago in my pocket, even though my salary is going up?
Mm-hmm.
And anyone will, whether that's a young gun going out for a pint of beer, and whether that's a couple going out for a meal or a family going out for a meal, it's just getting ridiculous to even do that. Suddenly going out for a meal at a local major chain, insert your favorite family restaurant, it's just becoming more and more and more expensive. Yeah, it's bonkers.
Would you give any advice to somebody who's maybe entering the workforce and is worried about these thresholds being frozen?
I think at the end of the day, it's a dichotomy in that you can't control what you can't control. These things will happen. I guess all you can do is turn inward to your bank statement. And I'm not one of these guys that said, sack off your coffee and put that £3 away, because maybe in the job that one does, that £3 coffee is what gives you enlightenment and gives you a mental break. And that's that just little bit of well-being, that little bit of treat. Crack on and do that. But if it's every day, does it need to be every day? Can it be somewhere else that replaces it? So if I was going to do, if someone's going to sit there, Vic, I'm concerned, what do I do? Just look at have a real good look at what you're spending your money on. And if you're doing all that you can and you're not being frivolous, and one, you're having a great laugh and you've got an opportunity to go out with mates and whatever, if there's any way of curbing, controlling, maybe doing a night in and get all the lads round or wherever it is, and maybe that's slightly cheaper, maybe. But otherwise, as long as you're just keeping an eye on what you're doing, what you're subscribing to, because everything is on a sub at £5 a month here, and everything we're doing is on a there's an app or whatever else. Just go through your apps. Are you still paying for apps that you're not using? Is there anything that you're paying for that you're actually not using? Why don't you bin it off and see how you go through life? And if you can manage without it, even if it is £1, even if it is £2, because as the old supermarket says, right now every little helps.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I mean, on that though, there are going to be some beneficiaries from the budget. The two-child benefit cap has been lifted. It's been a big policy initiative driven by the left of the Labour Party to get this cap scrapped. For those who don't know, because I only have one child, so it's never affected me at all. What was the two-child benefit cap? Who did it impact, and what is it now going to mean for people who have more than 2 kids?
So the two-child cap meant that you got the child benefit, I think about £90 a month, subject to earnings. It was means tested in the individual. So like this was the bonkers one. I think if one person in the household earned 95 grand, they wouldn't get it. But if 2 people earned 42,000 quid, they would. Or 45,000, they would. So same money, but if one earned slightly more, then they wouldn't get child benefit. And then they offered a slightly lower amount for the second child. And originally they would offer a reducing amount depending upon earnings for each child you had. Then they brought in the two cap policy, which said after your second child, should you wish to have more, you're on your own, you're not going to get any child benefit. And now that's been removed. So you can have as many children as you want, and you will receive on a reducing scale child benefit for each of those to assist with the daily sustenance of bringing up children.
And what does this actually mean for government spending and the likes? Because I have read that it's going to cost 3 billion a year or something like that. I don't actually know the nitty gritty if they're going to reduce an amount. You know, what's this?
We'll cover pensions and everything else, but the whole welfare budget is looking to be about 150 billion. Is what it's going to cost. As an old cynical 60-year-old man, I went straight, and I've got 4 kids over a couple of marriages. And I was talking to another, acerbic 60-year-old bald person. I went, should we go for a vasectomy reversal and have 3 kids? Yeah, and then we won't have to work. So I went straight down that really nasty, I think it's, on the one hand, of course, kids cost money. No parent can ever sit down. So parents or future parents, if you're listening, you will never be able to sit there and go, when can we afford, I've got enough money, we can afford to have a child. You can't. Newsflash, you can never afford to have a child. You will just have, and you'll get through that. And maybe you'll kind of, the lady will blur out the pregnancy and the birth and go, let's do it again. And off you go, and you do it. You will never be able to afford to have children. You will just make it happen. And the amounts they're offering of 50 or 60 quid a month or whatever might keep you in nappies for a bit. So it isn't a huge amount. But I guess it comes down to how this is going to be approached and used. And I guess for me, I would have liked to have seen, hold on, before you go further, after the second child, where are you on, in life? Are you okay for that? No one can afford, but are you okay? Are you guys working? Is everything all good? Or are we, by having to, why are we doing this and what's going to happen to this child? I agree it takes them out of poverty, but the child benefit that's being offered, it's not fortunes. It will take off the pressure for sure. Should they? Again, they're appeasing all lines in the party and across the other side of the house, and looking at Corbyn's Your Party and Nigel's Reform Party and trying to see who can they cut off at the pass to try and please everyone. I don't know. We'll go back to sorry, Kes, but we'll go back to the 16-year-old, 18-year-old who's just starting out to work. This country, forget, let's look at it quite simply. This country runs out to the end of its overdraft facility. And when all the money that it ever makes comes back in, it resets the bank account to 0. We are borrowing 100% of what we produce. So we can't contemplate 27 trillion debt and 20. So let's just say we've got a £5,000 overdraft facility, right? We end the month minus £5,000. The first of the month, our salary comes in and we set to 0. And if you're going to look and say, and if you're a bank and you've got this client doing this all the time, you are going to drop them a letter or say, can you come in, please? Can we have a chat over the phone, go through your income and expenditure and see where we can save money and get you out of so reliant of this overdraft and start turning you into profit? And to me, that's where what we needed to have done. I don't say remove the 2 cap, but have it there, but maybe a little bit of a sense check, on who is getting this and are they, what is going on? What is going to happen to this couple if they have child 3, child 4, child 5? How are they actually going to cope? What life choices are they making? What food choices are they making? You go into Pizza Express and you pay 10 quid for a pizza, but it's 18 quid for a salad. Mm. So if you're going to make food choices and things are tough, you're going to, you potentially going to go down not the most healthiest route because it's expensive. So what is actually happening to this child in that family household. So whether it was right, whether it's politically correct, whether it was within European Court of Human Rights, don't know. I could see both sides of someone who said no, hold the two, or release it, but I don't know. I don't know where this goes.
Well, let's maybe talk about something at the other end of life when we talk about pensions, because there is as you say, the welfare bill is growing. 152 billion. It's the state pension bill, and the calls from many people is that we need fundamental pension reform. There's obviously lots of pensioners who are reliant on a state pension. We saw this with the winter fuel allowance, but there's also many pensioners who have benefited from the greatest generational wealth transfer that has ever happened, who have significant assets, who are actually going to potentially be hit by this mansion tax as well, which we'll discuss later on. But talk to me about the state pension. Talk to me about what Rachel Reeves has announced and what you think should happen, because this is a big elephant in the room that doesn't look like it's being addressed.
So the minimum increase to state pensions 2.5% a year because of this mechanisms and looking at price index, inflation, etc., etc. This 3 times we're going to check this triple lock scenario to ensure that state pensions grow by a minimum of 2.5% a year. The cost is 6 billion. This year's increase alone is put on, and as you say, 150 billion. We are writing checks that this country cannot afford to cash. Based on, go back to if we were a person and running the bank account the way we do, we would be sitting there going, you can't keep doing this. I believe the help and assistance should be there. I would like my in-laws. Someone does know my in-laws. They don't need it. The vast majority of the vast majority of people that I look after, listen, financial advisor, I think we're looking after maybe 5-10% of the population. Don't need it. So happy with the state pension. They've paid in, absolutely. They've paid in 44 years of their working life. Is there an entitlement? It would be nice to receive state pension. I'll accept the pelters. If you go on the government website, it's a benefit.
Yeah,
it's a massive Ponzi scheme in the nicest possible way. If you get there, you get it. If you die, you don't. So, and it could be taken away. It could be increased. Could be whatever. So we all should hopefully get something, providing we make it. But how that is inflated and how that moves, that's where for me means testing comes in. But the issue that we have, and I completely get it, is that our 67, 68, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds are too proud. And rightly so. And they won't go into a job centre or wherever else and say, I'd like to see if I'm entitled to the triple lock or additional help. With the money saved, potentially, a task force could be set up to knock on a person's door and go, let's go through and let's see if you are entitled to additional. And that way, it's very discreet. No one's walking around with a van saying, state benefit help. Someone's going in with a car, knock on the door. I'm from the government, and if you could run that system, I know initially that would cost money, but the amount it would save, and to ensure that the people who really need it really get it. And those, when they've done it all and look at income and expenditure or whatever, kind of go, you know what, no, it was a nice while I was getting it, but I actually don't need it.
I have 2 thoughts on this, which is first and foremost, instead of the triple lock being the highest of the 3 metrics they use to raise the state pension by yearly, make it the median. That would seem to me the most sensible way of doing it. If you've got 2.5% inflation and is it wage growth? Is that the other one?
Yeah, I think I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Then make it the median, because at that point you're then going to fall in between, wage and inflation, which is a fairer representation of what the rest of society is going through. That for me would be the fairest solution, and it would cost you nothing. You just implement a new bit of maths. The second thing I would also do is have a an option in the. I don't know how state benefits are actually received. I don't know if you get it as similar you would a paycheck or something like that, because it hasn't been something I've ever had.
Monthly paid into your bank account,
And
for weekly.
so if you were to get some kind of statement, I assume that arrives, why could there not be an option to say, I don't need this. What I would like to do is divert this money to a charity or charities of my choice. I then benefit by getting because I'm then not taxed on it. So I then bring my taxable, well, I can then take more of my own private pension out, because I'm then don't have to use that state pension bit for it. I also then give to charities that I feel deserve it and can do more with it. You would then also assume, and someone would need to do the research on this, but you would get more support for the frontline people who need it, such as Age UK and Meals on Wheels. So you could actually kill two birds with one stone by literally just having an option, a payment option. The government still pays it, yes, but it's delivering the services required. That then means the government doesn't have to deliver those services. And for me, that seems to be a very simple solution that the government then can basically hands off and go, we're still doing the help, we're still offering the frontline support through our third sector, and the charities get much needed cash that they need to actually deliver the services that you hope then means less of our vulnerable people in society fall through the cracks. That for me would seem to be a solution that the government can, because what the government needs to do is a few things. It needs to lower its spending, one way or the other. It has to lower its spending. But the other thing it has to do is maintain the services that within the social contract, we have as citizens and they have as a government to deliver the services required. So by doing that little change, and as we've said, pensioners, some of them extraordinarily wealthy, having worked barely middle of the road jobs, they could directly benefit society. They can then do their bit of good, because it's nice to give to charity. And the government then essentially goes, we're fulfilling our pension requirement, and we are also then funding those frontline services. That would, for me, would be a solution that could kill a couple of birds with one stone.
It's a beautiful thing, but you're now reliant on the individual to have
Yes.
that kind of conscience, and the government is now kind of go, it's not our problem.
Mm.
We're now giving the facility to these individuals to redivert some of their money, but now it's up to those individuals. Charities, we know, will begin at home, and if those parents and grandparents in receipt of state pension might decide that they're going to take it and then start making gifts to grandchildren and children, so their families are better off. I think it's, why not stick it as an option and have it on there, and let someone who hasn't had kids or doesn't, for whatever reason, maybe they would. I also think, turning around and sitting there going, the lower end is where we're going to strike. You're entitled to more, but we need to assess, and we'll have someone to come round and assess. The other issue with what they're doing, the costs are phenomenal. And that's the whole reason why state pension ages have started to move out. When I set off work, I'm 60. When I started work back in the day, my state pension entitlement, I think, was £88 a week. When I was 16, 17, I remember seeing something, that's what I was going to get. And you look at it now to it being, 12, 13 grand a year. And I would have to contribute for 44 years. And I would, and if it was there at 65, I would get that. Then they equalised the ages for male, female, and now it's moving out 66, 67, 70. My eldest child is 30 in a few weeks' time. and I've got all the way down, I've got 4 all the way down to 14. And you kind of go, well, what's their retirement age? When is their state retirement age? Are we looking at 70? I think we're already at 70 for some 30-year-olds. So we're looking 71, 72, 73, all because, in my view, of an unsustainable system that's just making people potentially work longer. Okay, the state pension is, inverted commas, only 10 grand. It's a great help. And for some, it's what it is, what it is. But if you want to retire early, then you've got to start pay. You've got to have that facility to pay into your workplace pension. And then we go on to the salary sacrifice cap that says, yeah, great, do that. Be less reliant on the state. Build your own pot. You'll only want the basic state pension. You won't need any more enhancements. Great, but you can only sack off 2K a year.
So
You know,
talk me through.
I don't get it at all.
But talk me through that, because I heard the rumblings of this coming around through the cycle to work scheme, because very much into my bikes, and lots of the cycling trades were saying a few weeks ago that the government was looking at capping the amount on cycle to work. Now, this is what I assumed was a £2,000 cap, which I think that Rachel Reeves said something along the lines of, we shouldn't, the government essentially shouldn't be picking up the bill for somebody spending £4,500 on a very posh e-bike to go up and down the Yorkshire Dales of a weekend. That's not what the scheme's there for. My argument with that was like, well, if they're being healthier and they're getting out there, because I would rather have somebody on an e-bike who's still riding a bike in any form than not riding a bike at all and staying at home. I personally never saw an issue with it, and it was tiny. Like, I know government spending, we did with big figures. It's like 28 million a year. It's nothing. Like, really is nothing in the grand scheme of things. But talk me through how the rest of this salary sacrifice cap works, because I kind of get it from a cycle to work scheme point, which you only do up to £2,000 for a bike, which I think I'm all right with, to be honest. But for other salary sacrifice, does that mean that now my workplace pension, I don't know why I put in a few £100 a month, it's now going to be capped at 2K? That's all I can put in?
No. So you're 5 and 3. So there's normally 5% coming from you, 3% coming from the employer in the private sector. Those who work for local government and police, etc., they pay a hell of a lot more in as a contribution, but their pension schemes are worked on completely different metrics. What we're talking about here is there was the ability of making an adjustment to your salary where you were financially able to say, right, I don't want, instead of 30K a year, can I have 25? And that 5K, can you, Mr. Employer, Mrs. Employer, pay that into my pension?
Right.
So the salary is dropped to 25. So obviously the downside of that is your borrowing capabilities is going to be based on a 25K salary, not a 30K salary. So as long as someone gets their head around that and go, okay, fine. 25K, 5K less NI. Yeah. And that 5K now goes into the pension from the employer. From an employer's perspective, pension contributions are business deductible expense. You can see some employers going, well, I'm saving this NI as well. I'll bang that in for you.
Mm.
And suddenly this individual's getting 5.5K a year. It's not detriment to their income. They've worked the math out. And you're doing that every year, plus some growth somewhere, depending on where the individual's investing their money. And they're building up a really nice pension pot. That means that at 55, 57, 58, if they've had enough and they're looking at it and going, do you know what? I can make my choice. I'm going to go and do a menial job somewhere, be out in the garden, do something. I want to do what I want to do. And I want to work because I want to work, not because I have to work. And I can do the job that I really, really, really want to do, even though it's low paid, because I've worked hard and I was canny with my money and I reduced my salary because I could afford to live that way. On a bigger scale, someone's earning £53,000 a year and sacks off £5,000 of their salary. it took them down into basic rate tax.
Hmm.
And the actual fiscal difference was not that much at all, because you're saving 20% by being, by the time you work it out, a 5K sacrifice might have only worked out to be 2K lost in the pocket. I say only. The individual's done the work. They know what they're doing. And the same at the other end with, 6-figure earners. I've got clients who would reduce their salary down to £99,000. Yeah, restoring personal allowance. Maybe that's another chat with someone. Was that, that between 100 and 125,000 earnings is equivalent of a 60% tax, because you lose £2 of every pound of your personal allowance. You're over the 100K. So there were people that were, some would say exploit, some would say abuse, some would say be really clever with the facility that's there, because there was no cap in place. And if you've got someone that's made their own way, got their own money, they're on their bike, they're looking after themselves, they're being healthy, they've got money, the mental stress that's been relieved because they've been able to save and look after themselves, they're not going to be on the NHS's door. They're also likely to have private medical care, because they're doing a job they've either offered it through their employer or they can financially afford. Everything is ticking their box, going, right, we're sucking all your national insurance, we're sucking all your tax, even though it's slightly less, but you're unlikely to want anything that's going to cost us money. You crack on and do it. Now, in fairness, I'm a capitalist. It is what I do. It's the people I work with. I'm going to be all in favour of that. And with a 2K sacrifice, anyone that wants to sit there and go, I want to change direction, I want to do something. No, it doesn't stop people putting money into their pension. No, it doesn't stop an employer putting money into someone's pension. But it means that the amount that they can reduce their salary by to make it more tax efficient is £2,000.
My understanding of how the government uses taxation as a tool is to incentivize or discourage. So if you want to discourage people from drinking alcohol, you put a levy or an additional tax on to make it more expensive in order to basically price people out of it, or to make a decision. And the reason why there's tax incentives to paying into your pension is to encourage people to save and invest for retirement. What this appears to do, and this goes back to the state pension argument, which is you are discouraging people from putting more into their pension, which then means that they should have less reliance on the state, i.e. the state pension. Now, this is probably where the two things are not joined up, and where there needs to be some more joined up thinking, which is, if we are going to put a cap on how much people can sacrifice while they're earning, we then have to understand that means they're going to be more reliant down the line, because they're not going to have as much saved away.
It doesn't stop someone paying money in and paying in the £60,000 or whatever it else. It just means that in order to make those big payments, they can't make any adjustment in their income other than the 2K. So they're going to pay all the tax, going to pay everything. Then personally, they can pay the big money in. But previously, they could have salary sacrificed £60,000, £50,000, £10,000, and use the company to help do that. But it's gone. And I guess that's the nod down to your party, to the real left of the party. Socialism, everything, for everyone should be equal, etc., etc. And it's just, it's a shame. It was a great, for those who could, it was a great tax incentive. It was a great way for someone to make bigger contributions into a pension without it really, without it impacting on their life too much.
Why would they not just put a restriction on how much the business can claim rather than the individual? Because surely for me that would make more sense, because obviously there's an incentive for the business. That appears to me to be the most sensible thing to do, because you're still saying, look, we don't want to encourage people to basically fiddle the system a bit so they're paying less tax. You know, we don't want to encourage that, but we do appreciate if they're doing it for the purpose of saving for their retirement, that's a good thing. But what we're going to do is say, you know, the national insurance contributions you would have made as a business are still, we're
That
still going to.
is that's what happens now. So
Right.
they did that. They said, okay, you're paying someone 30,000. The fact that they have chosen to salary sacrifice 5,000 doesn't deter from the fact that they've got a £30,000 job. Therefore, you will still pay the same national insurance. You will not get the reduction from an employer's perspective.
But now this is hitting the individual because
And now this is now just kind of sitting there, just going, well, why are you stopping someone who is in a fortunate position that they can afford to reduce their salary, or they're of an age where they're 45 and they're kind of going, you know what, I haven't paid too much attention. The mortgage is on the way out. My kids are on their way out and doing their own thing. I've got more money in my pocket. I don't need this big salary. Can I reduce it down to a chunk and start funding my retirement so I can retire when I want to, rather than when state pension comes in?
Mm.
I thought there would be more encouragement, but we are where we are, and I'm sure there'll be. And I don't believe that the amount of revenue raised, I don't know the figures, but I don't believe it will be, you know, millions and millions and millions. The biggest place has gone is public sector salary increases, our doctors and everything else, welfare benefit, state pension, triple lock. That's where our massive expenses are. And then, you know, we'll come into this now. They're going to try and go, okay, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, in 1980, you made a shed load of money and you bought a £400,000 house in a leafy suburb somewhere. You've not done anything wrong. And now, through no fault of your own, this mansion is now worth £2.5 million. And they can't afford to heat the bugger to begin with. So they're turning off radiators in all the rooms and got damp on the walls. They can't sell it because it needs so much money and work to go on it. And now we've been told they've got to pay £3,500 a year for the privilege of living in that property.
Well, let's get on to the mansion tax because I'm
Should we throw in the EV and we'll have all that? I'm conscious of time as well.
I mean, look, the mansion tax and the EV charges are two things that were announced that we don't quite know how they're going to work. But let's talk about the mansion tax quickly because me being a kind of centre leftist but still capitalist is kind of thinking that on homes worth over 2 million, how they're going to value it. You know, first and foremost, the valuation of houses seems to be a challenge that they are probably not going to be able to do because, again, in my opinion, and this comes from someone on the centre left, anything the government touches is either 10 times more expensive or doesn't work. You know, that's kind of my rule. So if you can keep the public sector out of it, it tends to be more efficient. But the valuation, we don't know what's going to happen. But the principle of saying if somebody has a home valued over £2 million, that they then pay this additional tax on it because of its valuation. Now, the example you've given where they've bought this house and it is appreciated with value as house prices have, and we all hope they will because lots of people's retirement is now in bricks and mortar. So we need to make sure that houses keep inflating in value. This home is over £2 million. You're saying that they can't afford to heat it. You're saying they can't afford to sell it. But if they're in a position where it obviously needs a lot of work doing, you say, well, how does that affect the valuations? It bring it under yada, yada, yada. However, as a general principle, my view would be if somebody is in a home worth over £2 million, finding an extra £2,500 a year that they're probably paying in electricity alone is probably not too much to ask for somebody who's in a house of that size. And if it is too much, this is kind of where I get a little bit more right wing about it. Well, it's your problem. Sell it. If you can't afford it, get rid. You know, and this appears to be where the right think, no, protect them at all costs. And the left go, no, if you can't afford it, get rid. You're living beyond your means. So at what point do you say we need to raise income from one way or another? They've drawn this line at 2 million, which again appears to be a fair... you know, that's going to be a nice house. It's going to be in a nice area. If you need to bring in something like this, do you think they've actually done it in a relatively fair way? Granted, we don't know how it's going to work yet, but do you think that this is actually kind of fair enough?
I see it, but the amount of money, I think it's not even 1% of house prices, you know? Um, and if these people do it, and if you're aspiring, you've done really well, you've set up your own business, you've flown by the seat of your pants, and it's all gone well, and you want to then go, I want the statement house, you're going to look and go, no, I don't. Oh, if I am, I'm not going to have it here. I'll have it in another country. And so potentially people are looking to sell properties that no one wants to buy. And how do they get their money? So we're back to it. Yes, I agree. They've had to draw a line somewhere. Maybe the 2 million was the right. Maybe it could have been a million. I don't know. But I guess Rachel's got 600 odd MPs sitting around, you know, around the table, constituents. How many of them? How many of those MPs live in £1 million plus houses? Can I go for a million? No. I'll go for 2, and everyone in the Lords and the Commons may be wiping their brow, going, "Phew, yes, we can all get behind that." Those £2 million houses could be owned by people who employ thousands of people.
But it's £2.5 grand. If they, you know, they've done it,
But they're paying enough tax. They're paying more tax than you, me, and anyone else will pay in their lifetime on an annual basis.
But so then,
from an income perspective,
yeah,
you know, someone earning $1 million a year is going to pay more tax in 1 year than the vast majority of people will pay in their lifetime. And this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And off that person goes, sacking off their business, moving it offshore, and you've got 2,500 people who are out of work. And this was always my balancing act as to that whole tax the rich, tax the uber rich. You can't keep going to them. There's a great sales thing called "Who Moved My Cheese," right? And it's the thing basically, mouse going, constantly going to the same place to get cheese, get business, but then it's all gone, and they don't know where to go. And it's the same principle. Is you can't, because either one, they become too clever, and they'll wrap their properties up in trusts, and they'll wrap their properties up in different ownership strategies. Actually means it can't be taxed anyway.
Yeah.
Or 2, they won't be here because you taxed them out of sight, and now ultimately it comes down to the average working people. So for me, 1% on every tax band and a reset of council tax prices of house evaluation, bring it up to 2020 and apply the council tax on that, and job done. And the problem and the issue is everyone in the country knows that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I have a lot of sympathy to that. You know, I think they've wrapped themselves up in manifesto promises, and and as you said earlier, you know, I wish, and I said this to David Buick when I spoke to him last week, it's political suicide, but it's what economically needs to happen, which is you have already had your money. We paid out all this. We're now servicing a debt, increase in interest rates, and we need to sort this out. And we are all going to have to do it together. I also agree that they should have taken the opportunity to reform stamp duty, do it all properly, do it all as one. And it felt like it's a little bit, we're tinkering around the edges, and it's like, just do it, you know, and it's ripping off the band-aid. Now, I also do appreciate that the other thing that Rachel Reeves has managed to do is the gilt yields have come down, you know, because she's been that little bit steadier.
Yeah.
The gilt yields coming down does mean that as a country, we're paying less in interest to service our debt as well, which I think she's not getting enough credit for. That there does appear to be a strategy there, and she does appear to be very aware that if she can keep those gilt yields coming down, that's actually going to be the thing that makes the biggest dent, because you know what, we do 105 billion a year on interest payments. If you can knock 8-10 billion off that, is free money that she can play with, that then she can afford to do child scrap. So I do think she's been a little bit underrated in terms of how she's managing that, but she's totally beholden to the market. You know, anything can happen. You know, if war kicks off again at full, you know, we're all screwed, and then the strategy goes out the window. The one thing I would say though, and I said this on TikTok the the other day on budget days, you've got lots of people are very, very wealthy who aren't watching me on TikTok. They're far too busy doing other things. But there's lots of other people who are earning good salaries who are pissing off to Dubai and all that lot. And they're
Yeah.
saying, look at the state of the country and all that. And I would applaud anyone in that situation to go. The solution to sorting out the country, however you think it needs to be done, is not by leaving. The solution has to be stick around, do what you can, influence, lobby, bring people together, have these conversations. People just pissing off to places like Dubai. I mean, number one, it makes me feel like going, well, it was good enough for you to have your education, to be brought up here, to give you all the tools you needed to earn the salary you've got, and now you want to piss off. But the other thing is, like, you don't fix anything just by throwing your toys out the pack. It's like somebody slamming the door, walking out of an argument. You know, you haven't done anything to actually solve it. And I really applaud people. If you're ever in that situation where you're thinking, I'm on that 100 grand tax bracket, I'm not quite feeling, wealthy like I feel I should be. I am going to go to buy. Be like, I get it. I do get it. But I would just say, look, please try and stick with it. I do think things are going to get better, but it's going to take longer than everyone wants them to.
I agree. I think that has to happen. And I think we just need, like I say, everyone, no one's going to be surprised by what, by what any of us have just said, what needs to be done. And yet it appears that it's all about aligning with the party and making sure the party doesn't break manifesto rules. Well, you say with furloughing, with bounce back loans, and there were some awful, horrible people who took those, who took the bounce back loans and then, disappeared. Where's the task force to go find, pull that money back? That burden, is on all of us. Unfortunately, a lot of us benefited, and we knew it had to be paid back. So one, try and get those people who took what they did, and a lot of, I heard rumours of people taking big bounce back loans and paying off their mortgage with it because it was lower interest. Or some I heard had bought a Ferrari and the Ferrari finance was at 8% and the bounce back loan was at 0.25. And, hopefully, as long as they're still paying, not morally correct or ethically correct. But if they're paying, fine. If they're not, we need to go and find them. But we have got this debt. We knew it was coming. We all knew it needed to be paid back. And it just seems, like you say, as a tink around the edge, rather than coming out and going, come on, everyone, this needs to happen. Maybe we'll move the personal allowances to 15 or 20K. Maybe we'll drop back, a 45% rate comes back in at 100. Maybe high rate tax comes in at 45, or maybe we'll roll the personal allowance to 15, but then everyone pays 20. It's 21, 41, and 46, and a little bit on here and a little bit here. And if we do that, this is what we're going to end up. Mm-hmm. And then we might be able to reset back to where we were because we've paid off our debt.
Well, let's finish on something that we've got absolutely no idea how it's going to work, which is his EV charge.
Oh my god!
3p a mile
for the EV and 1.5p for a hybrid. Surely it should be the other way around.
I did not realise that. It should be the other way around. That is ridiculous. Okay, so this is essentially replacing what would have been car tax.
Yeah,
and I think just to give a little
there was a lower car tax. Well, there was zero, wasn't there, for electric for a while.
Yeah, but this is where I think there's a lot of confusion because people refer to it as road tax, and it's not road tax. It's essentially an emissions tax. Now, the incentive was to get people into more energy efficient cars. We are going to have no tax on electric vehicles and heavily reduced tax on EV vehicles. Great. This had to end at some point because they still cause damage to roads. They still, they were going to, the Treasury was going to lose a huge amount of money from motorists, as they have also done by lowering the fuel duty, which is going to come back in. So fuel is going to be more expensive, which again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if you're trying to encourage people into more energy efficient cars. But now they're going to bring in a charge and explain how they're going to bring that in.
So I've read that apparently obviously once your car is 3 years old, then you're going in for an MOT, and your mileage will be logged. So from year on year, they will be able to see how many miles you've done, and give you that pay per mile, and say, right, this is the extra amount you owe. Off you go. Between 1 and 3 years, at the moment, we don't have to go for an MOT, but apparently, when this comes in, I can't remember when this comes in, you will go to an MOT station or somewhere that does MOTs. They will log your mileage, and obviously, if it's on the anniversary, I don't know when or how, but I will go, oh, so you've done 15,000 miles. We will now apply the 3p or 1.5p per mile to that, and then the government will send you a bill.
I thought electric cars were smart and connected to the internet and things like that. Why are we having to go to an MOT centre?
Maybe unless there is a GDPR issue with sharing the data from that vehicle.
But we're not in the EU anymore.
I don't know. I don't know whether Elon might have done something and it's encrypted or whatever. I'm sure there'll be protocols that says no, you can't reach in, and it's whether or not the electric vehicle companies, presume, were happy to share that data. And did the person who bought the car agree that that data from the vehicle could be shared with the government? So that's what I think. So unless some massive email comes out to every EV and hybrid car owner to say your terms of your policies have been changed, and in there is, we will now be sharing your mileage data with HMRC or with DVLA, and so they can charge you accordingly, and that's it. I don't know. Other than that, I don't know how they're going to do it. Yes, I agree to wear and tear. My car has got a big, it's a hybrid, it's a big battery, it's a heavy vehicle. The tires are going to wear, so there's more rubber that's going to be in there. I get it. I just don't see why a hybrid should be less than electric, and that's got to fly in the face of the whatever Ed Miliband's title is, who's trying to do everything he can to get us more sustainable, and they've just done this, and I don't get it.
Do you think they're actually going to bring this in? Because I can't see how
I
it's
think
workable.
a lot of the stuff that they're spoken about is 28 and 29, and potentially by then we'll be having another election. So I think she's got 3 years, 3.5 years. I think we're in that kind of territory. So at 25, 26, I think when she's looking at it, we might be on the cusp of a change of government. Anyway, I don't know whether it's going to come through. Everything that was announced yesterday has got to go through on Wednesday, I should say, has got to go through the House of Lords. Mm-hmm. The last thing she says, I commend this to the House. So she's recommending it. It's got to be ratified. It's got to be going through. Some of the stuff, raises in duty on alcohol, tobacco, or whatever will be, and fuel will be simple. Other law changes, it's got to go through the system, and it's whether or not it gets through.
I wonder if this is actually a bit of a political ploy for her to, when they get into that stage, is go, because we've done such a good job with the rest of the economy, we don't need to bring this in. Yeah,
the rabbit out of the hat. One of the last couple of budgets start coming. When they start coming towards the end of the tenure, you would expect to see the rabbits coming out. We're not doing this. I have kept gilt yields down. We are paying back. Therefore, we do not need to bring this in. And we're doing this and we're doing that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would be amazed if there were no rabbits in the hat, not maybe next year, but the year after, as they start seeing the last 2 years and whether other parties are starting to rally and starting to see more focus, whether or not, because of 2 years of gilt yield control, that she then suddenly goes, right, the OBR or the fiscal responsibility has suddenly gone, this is where you are. And we're now going to not do this. And we're removing the mansion tax, or we're moving it up to 3 million, or whatever it is. It wouldn't surprise me at all.